Hope of an 11th hour reprieve dashed. Tomorrow, 7 asylum seekers who hope for a better life in the UK will instead be sent to Rwanda. Appeal court judges ruling that a flight taking them to Kigali can now set off.
This appeal is dismissed.
It's the flagship flight of the Home Office's new policy, one that means anyone now arriving illegally by boat or lorry could be sent to Rwanda to have their claims processed, staying in hotels like this one. Even those that are successful, deemed genuine refugees by the government, will have to stay in Rwanda rather than coming back to the UK. The Home Office promising them up to 5 years of support.
We've got individuals phoning each of them now and trying to tell them as gently as possible, telling them that we will carry on fighting for them, telling them that we've had 23 tickets cancelled. We've had 4 cancelled in the last 24 hours. So, we've still got another 24 hours. We will still be trying everything we can for them, letting them know that there are hundreds, thousands of people out here that don't agree with us. There's so many people that are behind them that do care about them.
The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, overruled her civil servants to impose the policy, insisting it would deter asylum seekers from making the dangerous journey over from Calais, a point remade in an urgent question today.
The British public rightly expect us to act. Indeed, inaction is not a responsible option when people are drowning and ruthless criminals are profiting from human misery.
The department's reportedly planning to launch an advertising blitz later this week, targeting asylum seekers with posts like this one. But official figures show the numbers of people making small boat crossings hasn't dipped since the policy was announced. In fact, double the numbers have arrived, more than 10,000 since the start of the year. It's a policy that has put the Home Office on a collision course with several senior Tories and beyond. This weekend, Prince Charles was reported to have described the move as appalling. The bitter irony for the handful on board tomorrow's flight that the policy faces another legal challenge next month.
Well, as you can see, there are more than 1,000 people here protesting outside the Home Office. It's too late now. There was a Boeing 767 with a handful of men on board will be taking off tomorrow unless individual applications can be decided. But as I mentioned, the judicial review that will decide whether this policy as a whole is unlawful will be happening in July. And one organisation that has said it is unlawful is the UNHCR, the UN's refugee agency. They made submissions to the court today and also last week, saying that it lacks sufficient safeguarding, that it broke the Convention on Refugees, arguments that ultimately weren't strong enough to overturn the ruling that the flight tomorrow could go ahead. Now, the Home Office and the government have been keen to push this policy through quite quickly. Boris Johnson is heading to Rwanda next week for the Commonwealth Heads of Government Summit, and the government were keen that the first flight could have taken off by then, because ultimately, as some say, this is more about symbolism than it is about numbers.
Well, Amelia Jen, thank you. Well, we asked the Home Office for an interview, but no one was available. We can, however, speak to the Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, who joins us now from the central lobby of Parliament. Why are you so critical of a policy that is clearly popular with some people in Britain?
I think the government is pushing ahead with a policy that is unworkable, is unethical, is extortionately expensive, and that actually risks making the problem of criminal, smuggler and trafficker gangs worse and not better. We've seen them admit over the last few days that they are seeking to send torture victims to Rwanda. And at the same time, we know the Home Office has asked the National Crime Agency to find 20% of cuts, even though they are the organisation that does the work to tackle the criminal gangs. So I think this is just getting it all wrong. We should be targeting the criminal gangs who are driving some of these dangerous crossings, rather than ending up with this incredibly expensive policy that is pursuing torture victims.
What's your evidence that it would make the people smuggling problem worse?
So 2 things. First of all, the evidence from the Israel scheme that did relocate refugees to Rwanda was that actually there was an increase in some of the more dangerous journeys, including trafficking and people smuggling. Secondly, we also know that the government is simultaneously talking about these cuts to the National Crime Agency, when what you really need to do is to tackle those criminal gangs. Because, look, what we need to do is to be preventing preventing the dangerous boat crossings in the first place, because that's the best way in order to prevent lives being lost.
How? What would you do to stop them?
So I think we need a stronger partnership, a stronger action with France and with Belgium and with Europol, because obviously this spreads right through Europe. If you look at the way some of the criminal gangs have been operating, there needs to be stronger action to target the supply chains. For example, some of these gangs, they're getting boats from China, they're then using them, putting people's lives at risk and effectively making profit from putting those lives at risk as well. You need that strong partnership. At the moment, Priti Patel's relationship with the French government seems to have effectively collapsed, and so we're not getting strong enough action across and the other side of the channel as well.
But that's basically you telling the French police to do their job better. So, and the government says, when you don't have a policy that would stop the traffic, and it sounds like that's true.
Well, the government's policy won't stop it. Let's be very clear, and then I'll tell you what the things are that we're proposing. So the government's policy won't and isn't working, and the Chief Inspector has himself said this is not having a deterrent effect, and instead what we're doing is spending hundreds of millions of pounds to transfer people thousands of miles across the world, including those torture and trafficking victims that the Home Office has been including as part of their proposals. But we think there are a mix of things that we should be doing. Much stronger action on tackling the criminal gangs in partnership with other countries. That should also include action on some of the social media advertising, because that's at the heart of their business model. That is how they organise.
Okay.
Secondly, do you want to have three more things I can tell you if you
briefly,
want?
Yeah.
Secondly, they have to speed up asylum decisions, because at the moment there's huge long backlogs that are growing. The government is only taking half as many asylum decisions as they were 5 years ago. That means we're not taking swift decisions so that refugees get support, but those who are not refugees then return home. Thirdly, we need action to get targeted, safe legal routes to target those who are most at risk of exploitation, redoing the existing resettlement schemes in order to do that, to try and prevent some of the illegal exploitation. And fourthly, looking to develop a replacement for the Dublin Agreement that the government has lost, which used to include both safe returns and family reunion.
But there's the question of whether the policy will work, but there's also the political effect. And I wonder, do you not worry that you are kind of walking into a Conservative trap? That this is a sort of a rerun of the Brexit immigration argument, and you are playing your part in it very conveniently for them?
I think you're certainly right that the government is doing this just for political game playing, rather than having a sensible, common sense, practical approach to how you tackle a serious problem, how you prevent lives being lost. But I also think that we have to stand up for British values of decency and common sense. And we are a country that for generations has recognised we need to step up when we have to solve problems, including tackling criminal gangs and criminal activity, but we also have to do our bit to support refugees and those who have fled conflict and persecution. We've always been able to do both in the past. We can do both again in a sensible and serious way, rather than just these headlines, which really are going to end up spending over £1 million per person without tackling the criminal gangs, without preventing the dangerous crossings. It's just the opposite of any sort of common sense approach that we're getting.
Yvette Cooper, thanks very much.